Welcome to Cathedral Talk, a podcast about architecture and Minecraft, where we converse to save Notre Dame. Zack, describe to us how your Roomba works.
How my Roomba works?
Yes.
Is it different than other Roombas?
Can you hear the Roomba?
No, but you once described that it does a pretty thorough job of hitting every corner of your house, and I've never seen a Roomba in action. How does this work?
Well, it's a little robot.
Robot?
You heard him.
Robot. Ours isn't actually from iRobot, which is the maker of Roomba. Ours is not a Roomba. You're using it as a like a Kleenex, like brand name to describe the whole thing.
Does the Roomba have programmed into it Asimov's laws of robotics?
It better not. All those stories are about how those laws don't actually work in practice.
Oh.
And mostly have to do with murdering.
Yeah, so I strap a little knife to the top of it and I have them fight. Even though I only have one, I'm implying that I have two.
You have two Roombas and you put them in a competition? Is your house like a gladiatorial pit?
Yeah, fictionally, yes. And so we have the unfinished basement, and it's got we got a big Lego Coliseum all constructed down there with little Lego people cheering them on.
Oh, nice.
And they fight.
You can buy that for like $700 if you want.
Almost as much as a Roomba.
Yeah.
I imagine a Roomba's a lot less than that.
Really?
Isn't a Roomba like $200?
How cheap are Roombas?
I don't know. I don't have a Roomba.
I thought you had a Roomba. Oh, wait a minute. I thought you had a Roomba. I could have sworn you've told me that you have a robot that cleans your house.
Yeah, as I said, play the tape back.
Tom doesn't listen to you.
Yeah, Tom doesn't listen to me.
Tom doesn't listen.
Well, in the edit, Tom can play the tape back and he can hear me say, I don't have a Roomba. I have another robot vacuum, but you're using Roomba as like the brand name like you would use for a Kleenex.
It's like, the Midwesterners who call, soda like Coke for some reason.
Yeah, he gave that example with Kleenex.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is going to be a wild episode.
So you can buy Roombas that are both more expensive and less expensive than the Lego Coliseum. So everyone's right.
Okay, great.
You can buy them for $200 up to... Well, this says starting at $1,100. I don't know what goes beyond that.
All right, so Zach, does your wannabe Roomba, when it fills up, does it like have a programming thing where it like automatically dumps all of its gunk and then just keeps going? I don't mean like on the floor. I mean like does it have like a designated like trash like repository for the gunk so then it can like just keep going without you having to manage it?
There's a episode of Futurama where Fry gets trapped in a prison. I'm like a caged animal, just letting my f***s fall where it may. And Leela goes, Fry, animals go in the corner. So that's what you reminded me of. No, my not a Roomba doesn't poop randomly in designated locations.
So you have to empty it yourself. That's what I'm trying to get at.
Like a heathen.
Yeah. When you clean the vacuum cleaner, do you then become the vacuum cleaner?
Ooh. That's a good Aristotelian quote.
Yeah, Aristotle said that. Yeah.
Did Aristotle say that?
Yeah. They had Roombas back then. I'm still trying to figure out how there could be such range from $200 to $1,100. How can this Roomba be that much better?
I don't know, man.
Oh, it says advanced technology. Now I understand.
Yeah, the $200 one is what Aristotle had.
Makes sense. They've improved since then.
So how quickly did the wannabe Roomba, like, how quickly does it fill up? Like, how often do you need to change it? Like, every day, every week, every hour?
The charging station is in my wife's office, and so she's responsible for cleaning it. So I don't have an answer for you. I'm sorry.
Well, this has been a productive conversation.
Yeah, why are we talking about this?
I have no idea, man.
Because, David, you said lead off with an interesting story. This is what I came up with.
All right.
This is the least prepared I've ever been for an episode, and I'm allowed that. I've thrown so many topics at you guys.
I'm not even convinced that David did any preparation. I think he just wanted to use the excuse that we had to come up with the intro topic because he came up with the main topic. But you've done no preparation for the main topic, per usual.
I think those can be mutually exclusive points. I could have done no preparation, and it's still your responsibility to do the intro.
We're not logisticians.
You're a programmer. Isn't that job all about, like, Booleans and things?
Booleans and things. Yes.
So you are a logistician.
I put all the ones in the right place and all the zeros in the right place.
You write in machine language? That seems onerous.
Yeah, I've got a little magnetic needle, and I've got the hard drive open, and I just make sure all the ones are ones and all the zeros are zeros.
Well, you do actually have to be careful about that, because what is it, the particle? Is it photons? No. Maybe?
For what?
That go through everything. Neutrinos?
Yeah, neutrinos go through everything. Yeah.
Neutrinos that go through everything and occasionally can flip zeros and ones.
Yeah.
Is that a bit? Is that right? Is that
Yeah,
the term right?
a bit. Yeah.
Can occasionally flip bits, and most of the time it doesn't matter, but it's like happening all the time. But occasionally it does matter, and the most notorious example that I'm aware of is some, I want to say Central European country, I don't remember which country, had an election that was off by a very specific number in binary, like 4026 or whatever the number in binary is around that range.
Right.
And so they looked at like, well, that's clearly just a 0 and 1 flipped. And the best explanation is that a neutrino or some, if that's not the right particle.
Cosmic ray.
Yeah, a cosmic ray hit the bit and flipped it.
Suddenly I'm having deja vu. Have we talked about this on the podcast before?
Did we talk about this?
David, you have to listen to all the episodes again to see whether or not we've talked about it.
We can ask my sister-in-law. She'll know better than we will.
Oh, no. Maybe I was just thinking of watching Veritasium. Maybe we didn't talk about it. Yeah, okay. Sorry. Continue.
You can come back with next week whether we've talked about this or not.
Well, that'll be a month. And by then I'll have forgotten what we talked about.
I already have.
We're like goldfish.
What?
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 So who wants to give money to Notre Dame?
Notre Dame? A lot of people want to give money to Notre Dame. They have a lot of money.
Yeah, you actually have some connections over there, don't you?
Yeah, we're not talking about that part of it, though.
Okay.
I've tried to smooth transition into other topics so many times, and I've been lambasted by my other hosts about my smooth transitions, and so I tried a hard transition.
Sometimes you're just
right now.
Sometimes you're too smooth, and we need to break it up for the audience. They can't keep up.
Yeah,
this allows for the jingle.
Right, and now I tried a hard transition, and I just got shut down immediately.
Well, you did say the name of the cathedral that this podcast is about wrong, so
I say everything wrong. Notre Dame?
Nope.
Not quite.
Notre Dame.
I mean, again, even I don't really fully say it right. I mean, there's this like Notre. I can see there's actually like there's an R in there that's very hard to pronounce for us Americans. But I think general approved pronunciation for that cathedral is Notre Dame in American English. But again, if you have any French speakers out there, they can do a far more elaborate R sound that I cannot produce very well yet.
Did anyone think I was talking about the university?
1/12 of our listeners, yes.
I don't think so.
I can ask her.
We have 12 listeners? That's a lot.
Well, anyway, it has been a long time since we actually talked about like our purpose and our goal of this podcast. So it is a good time to maybe bring up or broach that subject.
Exactly, yeah. So what I did want to talk about is what is the goal here? We are asking to donate money to a cathedral that had a catastrophic fire, and we all believe it should be rebuilt. But it does beg the question, that's a very expensive proposition. What you cited at some point, multiple billion, 10 billion, something like that? Is that what you were thinking, Tom?
Oh, I don't think I've thrown out any number. I think they initially needed $1 billion, but now I think they're predicting at least several billion to probably do the whole job. I haven't heard the latest number, though.
Right. So that's a chunk of change. And it does beg the question of, there are other things you could do with that money, too. There are...
David, you're not coming up with any good ideas, David. There's only one good idea what to do with this money.
Tom is, I'm trying to be very sincere here, and Tom is not even willing to entertain the thought that there might be other good uses of money rather than donating to Notre Dame.
Tom is like 3 margaritas in.
This is water. Thank you very much.
With a lot of ice.
You know how I operate. David's tried to have this conversation at least one other time on the podcast, and that was the time where I was just like, nope, we're not going to talk about that. Snip, snip, beep.
Yep.
Yep.
Yes, he did.
I'll own up to it.
So, there's lots of other good causes in the world and causes that are arguably more human livelihood centric in terms of protecting health or social services or things that people need to live. And I think those causes are all very worthy too. Yet I am still also comfortable with the thought of asking people to donate money for something more cultural, like Notre Dame. So I wanted to dive into what is the role of a cultural symbol like Notre Dame? Why is it deserving of money compared to so many other causes out there?
Well, I think maybe for the trajectory of this particular conversation, we should approach it from a very mundane level first, then slowly work our way up to a sort of a higher level of philosophy over values. So rather than go too high too quickly, maybe we could start with some practical things. So maybe like the first thing I'll say here is people come up with all sorts of random things to raise money all the time, right? If you find any topic out there, you will find people trying to raise money for it. So Notre Dame is at least just as deserving of people who want to raise money for their local library, or people who want to raise money for their local baseball team, or people who want to raise money for their newspaper, or there's lots of things that people are always raising, some kind of funding for. So this is just the general trend for how our modern age works right now, I'd say.
All the examples that you gave were local things.
Yeah, I was noticing that too.
Local library, local sports team.
That's true.
For a lot of us, we don't live in France.
Yeah, well, and that was just going with the first thing that comes to mind, yeah.
So it's a distant topic for me. I have never been to France. If there are issues local to me, why would I prioritize another country's religious monument over something local to me?
Well, I don't mean to just make it sound like we're putting that all on Tom, so I'm just asking him the hard question. So I'll take a stab at answering how Zack is framing it too. I think there is a value in global monuments. They are a symbol of collective history, and they're part of something that is bigger than yourself. Yeah, that you're donating to something bigger than yourself. There's not much better an example than a cathedral if you really dive into that deeply, because, we talked about how a cathedral takes hundreds of years to build.
Yep.
Historically. So that's multiple generations. That's not one person's vision. When you go into the space, you are struck by how small you are in comparison to the human ingenuity that went into it. So I think there is an element of the larger international context, global context of it was a global event when Notre Dame burned. It was on CNN for 4 hours straight, if I remember correctly.
It felt longer than that.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think it was 8 or 9 hours of air, but I was just...
I think the most terrifying part, I think, was like the first 4. Or maybe that's the period I was at work.
Yeah, no, it was on all day.
Yeah. So, I think the world watched, and so the world is responding.
Yeah.
Would you put it in the same sort of category as raising funds for, like, the monument at 9/11, World Trade Center, Ground Zero?
Well, putting aside that, of course, one was a terrorist attack and one was an accidental fire, putting that to the side for the moment, I think what I still find, at least for us, quite different is that Notre Dame, like you said, is far away. It is something that is... for a long time has stoked my passions for architecture and cathedrals, and again, just being my favorite building. And I think there is something to that distance, actually, that makes it more romantic somehow. I feel that when it's something far away, I feel more inspired, I guess, to feel like I am engaging with something that is completely out of my own world.
I would take that far away in both miles, but also time, because a building that is 800-ish years old is further back in time, and that is an extra level of wanting to preserve that. Like, we talk about the Natural Cathedral because it's where we live, or it's both closer and much more recent of a building. The Natural Cathedral had its own, not quite as catastrophic, but
mini disaster
with an earthquake, I think 10 years ago at this point. Yeah, it's 2011, right?
Yeah, you're right. I guess it was 10 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, 10 years ago. And we didn't start a podcast about that. Now, granted, different parts of our lives and all that, but...
no, back then I was still a nerd playing good old World of Warcraft, so it was a little bit of a different age.
Your first Notre Dame is 2011.
You're right, it is.
Yeah.
Huh. You're right. I had forgotten that those two did... It's funny, those two things do not seem to coincide, but I guess you're right, they do.
You might have been literally working on it when the earthquake happened that day.
Well, no, that's not true. I was in the class.
Well, I know you were at school. I mean that day.
No, I mean that whole day we were just trying to figure out, what had happened to the city because nobody knew anything.
Okay, you were not playing Minecraft on the day of the earthquake. I apologize.
Yeah. I mean, okay, so we brought this up on the day of the earthquake. I'm in my classroom, and again, this is the East Coast of the United States, so. In the United States, we have plenty of huge earthquakes more out west. But on the East Coast, anything gets pretty puny. What we had was a 5.8 on the Richter scale, which, again, pretty puny for the general scale, but for us was pretty shocking. And I was in my classroom on the second day of school, and then when the earthquake struck, of course, I had never experienced an earthquake before, but somehow I instantly just knew exactly what it was. I was like, this is an earthquake. So I'm quite proud that I actually recognized right away what was going on.
I mean, the earth is quaking. It's
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know. Explosions, terrorist attacks, I don't know. We live in D.C., maybe some big thing had happened with lots of shaking. I mean, it's, We've also had the space shuttle on a 747 fly right past my classroom before when they deposited Discovery at the Smithsonian. So, we've had some interesting things fly by my classroom before. But anyway, when the earthquake went off, I just started shouting, get under the tables, get under the tables. And again, since this is the second day of school, I didn't know anybody's names. So I was just like, hey, you, that person, get under there. Hey, what are you not getting? I was shouting. And meanwhile, nobody else knew what to do. We had never had any earthquake training. And I heard reports later that a whole bunch of kids were just like, run out of the building as fast as you can, which I guess is the exact opposite of what you're supposed to do during an earthquake. But at the end of the day, we were all stuck on the field for, I think, a couple hours when we were just sort of waiting, because after the initial earthquake was over, we evacuated. Again, I'm not sure if that was what we were supposed to do or not, but we evacuated. And then after we went onto the field, we're all standing around outside and we're like, is it safe to go back in? And we were all just sort of like, well, my car's in the garage. So we were all just sort of like, I remember the teachers were all like, you going first. And then when I went in my classroom the next day, there was actually a big crack up one of the corner walls. So different buildings in the area took damage in addition to Cathedral. It was an interesting time. Most of our buildings were not built to withstand earthquakes.
I mean, it's an interesting comparison to Notre Dame in that suffered, I mean, the term is appropriate, catastrophic damage. Earthquakes, I think, are catastrophes, I think, by definition, on various scales. And it's been a decade, and the construction is maybe almost not done. It's still ongoing. They've
oh yeah, I think they're technically halfway at this point.
Yeah. So they made a lot of progress, but they've got a long ways to go. But I would be surprised if Notre Dame moves that slowly.
Oh no, they've already done so much more work than I think the cathedral here ever could move at the same pace. I mean, they just have so much more manpower and so much more funding.
So much more funding.
It's just a whole different scale.
Now we're bringing it back.
Oh, sure.
Notre Dame is special for some reason, and I'm trying to figure out what that is.
Well, I mean, I'll refer you to the first episode when we ascertained.
Okay, not you. Zach, why is it special?
I'm not the right person to ask about this. It's special because people believe it's special.
That's why I don't care necessarily about whether you think it's special or not. I'm curious why you think, why is it different? Why is it a valuable use of money? And if you think it's not, you could say that'll make for an interesting episode.
Oh, God.
No, I think it is a valuable use of money. It's certainly a valuable use of my time, right? My time is, I feel like, worth a lot more than just a donation to the cathedral. And I spend a lot of time.
Zack
on
doesn't
this
mind
cause.
continuing the podcast and pledging $20,000. Go, Zack. You can be our number one contributor.
Yeah, no.
Well, all right. How about $1 for every minute you spend recording?
What? Bad incentive structure.
Anyway, I think it is. I think it's worth my time. I think it's worth my money. But I think a lot of things are. I don't feel weird about spending my money on coffee and also spending my money on charities. Like, I can do both at the same time. And your question is like, why one charity versus another charity? I'm obviously not donating to every single charity in the world. Why am I discriminating between charities? And so, like, I'll donate to NPR, I'll donate to PBS, I'll donate to Doctors Without Borders, I'll donate to the Friends of Notre Dame. Why am I not donating to, like, the Sierra Club? I'm sorry, Sierra Club, if you're listening. I don't donate to you, but it's not because I don't like you. I do like you. So your question is, why do I choose to donate to a cathedral, even though I'm not a religious person and I'm not a French person, and I don't donate to the Sierra Club, even though I live out in the Rocky West? Because it's important to my friends, and what's important to them because they're my friends is important to me. I don't care too much about the building itself, unlike Tom. But Tom is important to me, and so the things that are important to Tom are important to me. I do care about the outdoors, but I don't need to donate to the Sierra Club specifically in order to protect the outdoors.
I think what you're getting at in terms of there are multiple places you spend your money, and it's incredibly hard, if not impossible, to some extent, to truly rank them. It makes me think of actually War and Peace. There's a character in there who is trying to figure out the meaning of life, more or less, throughout the entire book. And he's very wealthy. And at some point, the stage of life that he is in, he's just donating all of his money. Like, he is so indecisive in knowing what is a good thing to donate to and what is a bad thing, that he just donates to anything and everything. And it's interesting because when I first read that, like, well, that sounds like a reasonable philosophy, but it's clearly not the author's view that is the correct thing to do, because he's being indecisive and indeterminate, and he needs to become a more decisive character. That's kind of his trajectory. And so by the end, there's a scene where, like, someone begs him for money and he doesn't give it, and clearly the author, from my reading, was trying to say, like, he's finally found himself. But I always found that very strange, because that sounds the opposite of the sort of morality that I'm used to. And because I recognize in myself the struggle that he was facing before. Frankly, for many years of my life, I've lived in a fairly well-off position, and I have not donated as much money to charities as I should. And part of that has frankly been a concern over, well, maybe I'm not donating it as effectively as I could. And that is a crutch, and it's been a horrible one, because it has resulted in me just not donating in the first place. Because I haven't verified, like, well, this is how I really should spend my money, or donate it.
That sounds like almost a similar argument to make to myself sometimes, where, like, why am I not reading more books? It's like, well, I should be doing more quality reading, so therefore I should save my reading for later. And in the end, the result is I just don't read books too much.
Sure.
I'm trying to overcome that, for the record.
Yeah.
I wouldn't put yourself through any grief for doing the right thing or not doing enough of the right thing, especially since you identify that's holding you back. I'm not telling you anything new, but I don't want to be individualistic about it when I say it's your money, right? You get to decide, but, like, I don't know if I would choose efficacy as the metric for where my charity money goes. And there are some tools out there that help you figure out, like, out of every dollar that I spend, how much of this charity is going towards their mission and how much of it's going to, like, administrative and overhead costs. So if you were interested in efficacy, there are tools out there that can help you.
There's even tools that are even farther than that, I think, GiveWell. They rigorously investigate charities, like figure out the number of lives you will save for every dollar, and rank charities that way or something.
Right. And I'm though, since those tools are out there, I'm not actually advocating for anyone to use those because I don't think, like, if you were to use those tools and you were to look at cathedral reconstruction, it probably wouldn't show up anywhere on that list. And so if we were to advocate for people to give their money where it's most effective, then you shouldn't give your money to cathedral reconstruction based on that. And so my argument is not because of that, but I don't think efficacy is why I personally donate. And I don't recommend efficacy for other people for why they should donate.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I see this particular question from sort of 2 points of view, sort of moving now into sort of higher philosophical perspective here. Because there's the question, why support this kind of cause in general? Like, why support a building that has nothing to do with saving lives, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the second part of the question, why this particular building when there's lots of buildings that need funding, like the National Cathedral and more, which we may talk about in just a minute.
Mm-hmm.
For the first bullet point there, though, why this kind of cause in general? I think I have to always bring it back to being the teacher I am, because it all, again, comes down to passion and how humans work as far as passions go. Aside from the fact of Notre Dame being an incredible historic icon and its value just for its place in history, the ability to inspire passion in others is very important, especially for young people. I remember last year when I was virtually teaching for the whole school year, it was, of course, a very difficult time to make connections with people online with my students. It's way harder to get people to turn their cameras on, and it's way harder to really get to know people, especially young people who are maybe taking your calculus class. There was one student who, of course, I'll not mention by name here, but there was one student who was just mesmerized by architecture. And I had so much fun striking up a dialogue about architecture with this student. And what I really enjoyed in particular was that this student was really into classical architecture with, again, the Greeks and the Romans. And this person came out and told me right away, my favorite building's the Parthenon. And I was like, oh, that's great. Let's talk about the Parthenon for a little bit. And so we talked about the Parthenon, and I explained all the cool things about the Parthenon, and we talked about the different kinds of capitals for columns, Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian, and all that. But then, of course, this was the opening for me to then start talking about other kinds of architecture, like Gothic architecture. And then
really? You try to convert them?
Yes, I definitely did try to convert them, and I
Did you
think
succeed?
I made some headway. I made some headway.
Okay.
So I started to share with them a lot of the things that I had done in Minecraft. And this is, again, one of the reasons also is like, why are you doing this in Minecraft? If you're so into cathedrals and you want to know about, their history and get accurate depictions of them, Minecraft is not the right way to get a great depiction of a true cathedral. There's far better things you can do with real 3D wireframes and laser scans and point clouds. But again, the special thing about Minecraft is so many people identify with it, including so many of my students. I have tons of students right now who play Minecraft in high school. And it's so much fun to talk about, I'm building Notre Dame right now in Minecraft, and their lights just turn on. They're just, oh, this is so cool. And I've showed them some of the videos I've done, and I show them how later on in calculus, we're going to be learning more about integration and volumes and solids and how those concepts can then be translated into creating 3D structures in Minecraft, like domes. How do you calculate, the surface of a dome? Try to kind of treating blocks like they're parts of a point cloud. We've talked about domes a little bit, but we'll get into the whole how do you make a dome in Minecraft in a future episode. But again, it's all about connection, right? And in the same kind of reason why would I build this in Minecraft as opposed to learn how to just build it in some kind of architectural rendering program? Again, one, there's that connection you get with so many more people when you do it in a medium people identify with. But also just the value of the building to have that ability to reach out to so many people And I believe that, different things have different kinds of potential to make that happen, and Notre Dame's very much at the top of my list.
Your word connection there strikes a chord with me, because I think that's an almost nicer way of putting what I was saying in terms of the global context earlier, where it's a cultural touchstone that a very sizable percentage of the world can identify. I won't say all, certainly not all, but
of course not.
But a very large percentage, one of the larger percentages, in terms of any structure or anything human made.
Yeah.
And I do think the human made element of it matters.
Yeah.
Because the Grand Canyon's beautiful too, and we want to preserve that, but that's pulling at an entirely other heartstring than something like a human-made cathedral. And so the connection that you say you can share in that, and if the building was to be lost, then obviously that's one less thing that a lot of the world has in common.
Yeah. And in such an age where we're so divided, the more things that we can be united around, the better.
That probably is. That kind of gets to the second question that I wanted to get to, and I think we kind of got to it there, is what is the value of cultural landmarks like that? Not just the question of why donate money to X, Y, or Z comparatively, but what do the broad question is, what is the purpose of culture? I guess, why does culture matter? But more specifically, why do, since this is a structure-based podcast, why do significant buildings matter culturally?
I have a lot of thoughts on culture. I'm weird about it, though, and I don't imagine that anyone will sympathize with me on my thoughts on culture. I actually get culture very little.
Again, I feel like you continually put yourself down in ways because you are a very cultured person, but carry on.
Well, you can say that, but I don't necessarily know what that means. So, the best that I can understand about culture is it's a suite of habits and traditions that you share with other people.
Sure.
All right.
As the monkeys that we are, habits and traditions are pretty important for a sense of stability, which is almost critical to a good mental framework. Having a sense of stability is sort of up there. And having a group of people that you share habits and traditions with can give you a greater sense of stability and to allow you to grow. I personally, though, am sort of an agent of chaos and much less an agent of stability. So I don't really gravitate towards that mentality personally. And so that's,
I was about to say, how are we not going to be sympathetic with this? And now I see we're getting to it.
So the problem in my mind of having all of these cultural artifacts linger is that at some point they become not so much an anchor in a positive sense, that an anchor for a ship will keep you in the bay when there's rough waters. And so an anchor traditionally is a symbol for safety and stability. But there's another way of thinking about anchors, which is that they prevent you from moving,
sure,
which is, part of what an anchor does. Mm-hmm. But if what you're trying to do is move, an anchor is counterproductive to that. And so there's a weight of culture that presses down on society and it prevents you from moving. And I am not going to advocate for the destruction of a cathedral, but that cathedral was built and it became a cultural touchstone. Having that cathedral and putting your money into it may prevent, in some capacity, someone from creating a new cultural touchstone that will have the same sort of impact.
Yeah. No, that's a very interesting point. And that actually remind me, I know we talked about this long ago, early episode. What was your opinion on the different roof proposals for Notre Dame before they decided to just go back to more or less as it was before? I don't remember your opinion then. Were you more open to the more quote-quote radical designs?
I mean, I wasn't for the bronze simulacrum of the fire itself.
Oh gosh.
I do remember you talking about that one.
Oh.
That was in poor taste to be in the list.
That was in very poor taste.
There were others,
but there were others. I'm totally fine with There's that forest that grows
Yep.
trees specifically for reconstruction in case of disaster, and they're utilizing in the construction those trees because they were grown for that purpose. Had those trees not existed, I would be fine with something else. I mean, I advocate for the use of those trees because someone has to maintain them. So from like a labor perspective, like someone put a lot of hard work and energy to grow those, and they were grown with that purpose and maintained for that purpose. And so to not use them would be like a giant middle finger to the people who run that tree farm.
When you say somebody put a lot of hard work into growing those trees, I just like envision a druid just walking out there and just casting like this leafy tranquility spell, like grow trees, grow.
Yeah, I mean, there's that extreme, which I would really love if it were true, but there's the other extreme of like, that's their business, right? Like at the very least, they put a lot of mental energy into it. They don't actually have to be casting a spell.
More like they put a lot of mental energy in, we must wait until next year to chop these down. And they kept saying that for 100 years.
Yeah, I mean, anyway, the... So,
but what about more like the like, not just talking about the materials, but like a complete redesign to move forward in the way you're saying?
But my point wasn't to ramble about construction materials. My point was that I'm in favor of those construction materials because they favor a living person currently engaged in the ecosystem of that building. It's not to satisfy the wishes of a dead duke or the wishes of like a dead abbot. It's to benefit a living person doing an active job. And so had that person not existed, I would favor a living architect's opinion about what the roof should look like. And I personally don't have any weight given to them deferring to a dead architect. They're the architect. I want your opinion. If your opinion is do what the dead architect says, then, fine. You're not adding too much value, but, you're still doing what we paid you for. So I'm fine with that. But if their opinion was something other than what the dead architect wanted, I would still value that.
Yeah, I see what you're getting at there. Like, again, the design at Notre Dame that is being replicated to replicate the spire that burned down and to replicate some of the intricacies of the lead-paneled roof over the forest timbers. The architect that had probably the most influence on many of the things that they'll be replicating was Viollet-le-Duc, who was the great restorer of Notre Dame in the era of like Victor Hugo, post the French Revolution, when Notre Dame was really run down and in danger of being just trashed altogether. So yeah, it's an interesting question. Why just replicate, again, a dead guy's work as opposed to have fresh blood go into it? I think I've already voiced this opinion to some extent, but we have plenty of space in all of our major cities for new stuff to go up all the time. New architects, new materials, new ideas, new spaces to build things. We're certainly not in danger of running out of lots to build things in new places, really, anytime soon. We're always knocking stuff down and building new things. Having these cultural touchstones like Notre Dame, as many as they are around the globe, they still seem rather rare. I think the rarity of something as special as a Gothic cathedral, there are so few of them. I mean, even in France, which is known for its Gothic architecture, there's just a handful of maybe a dozen at most really famous cathedrals that, make most of the textbooks. And, that's not that much in terms of what we're saving as opposed to how much is being birthed anew.
Yeah, and so I think there's space for both opinions, right? And which is why I have absolutely no problem donating money to restore an old building, right?
Yeah.
It's just that I am not personally super sympathetic to the idea of keeping old things around just because they're old.
Well, one of my favorite stories that I've actually just heard recently on yet another documentary that I was watching sometime recently about the Notre Dame restoration was, people were interested, people were concerned and interested, out of all the buildings that could have had such a catastrophic fire, why was it Notre Dame? Why was, at this age, at this point in time, one of these most famous buildings on Earth to truly just set itself on fire like that. Why was it this most famous building ever? And an interesting perspective I heard to that question was Notre Dame is almost kind of like it's, to some extent, sacrificed itself to bring a new profound passion for the preservation of many of these cultural landmarks. An interesting anecdote I heard was, I think I've already mentioned how Notre Dame was lucky in that they had many laser scans taken of its interior and exterior before the fire because so many people were already really passionate about it. In particular, one researcher named Andrew Tallon had done extensive laser scans of Notre Dame as like a new budding technology because he was super passionate at loving Notre Dame and wanting to document it and research it and preserve it. After the fire happened and the whole world stopped to watch this tragic event unfold, I have now learned that the number of laser scans that are now being conducted across France and really across the world is skyrocketing. That this event that happened at Notre Dame has made everybody say, we value these public works of art and we want to save them for posterity. And Notre Dame has shown us the value in this new kind of preservation. And so I just found this a very interesting anecdote that, it's kind of almost like Notre Dame to some extent sacrificed itself for the betterment of the whole world of architecture. Zach's making lots of weird faces at me.
Yeah, I think you were a little bit too poetic with his sacrifice.
Probably.
Because it's not a sentient entity.
That's what you think.
It didn't burn for a purpose, for an extant purpose.
Yeah, but humans can turn it into a purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think if you're going to sacrifice, you have to make the choice. Someone doesn't have you sacrifice for them.
I was throwing in a little personification, Zach.
It was an unintentional.
I'm allowed to do a little personification.
You are, but you called out my face.
I went too far. I went too far.
You asked me why I was making that face, and I told you. I wasn't going to say anything unless I was called out.
Is unintentional sacrifice an oxymoron?
That's what I was trying to say, right? Is that that doesn't make sense. The cathedral didn't sacrifice itself for other people to do laser scans. No one, it wasn't like, oh man, I'm looking at all these other cultural monuments around here and they're all falling into disrepair. But this one guy did a laser scan of me, and I think that was a great idea. I'm going to set myself on fire to galvanize all these other art historians to do the same thing.
I mean, I guess we don't know the motivation of that guy who ran up the stairs once, didn't see a fire, and ran back down. I don't know, maybe there's ulterior motives there.
But it wasn't the building.
Wait, didn't we establish in episode 1 that David has a greater than 0% chance of being the arsonist of Notre Dame?
Greater than 0. To going back a little ways to Zach's point on the stability versus the need to allow culture to move on, as in all things, I think the balance between the two is, I like your description of both extremes there, and I support a balance between the two. And I would put Tom on the end of being the extreme of maximum preservation and Zach on the extreme of maximum change and moving on. And so I'll just sit here happy in the middle.
That's fine.
I think that's reasonable. But in my own defense, I'm not unsympathetic.
I know you're not.
Yeah. I was just saying that I like to surround myself with people who have different opinions than myself as well, and being someone who isn't a traditionalist, I like to surround myself with people like Tom who are in some regards traditionalists, and so I at least have that mindset around. Even if it's difficult for me to sympathize with it directly, it's easier for me to sympathize with Tom than it is for me to sympathize with the abstract idea.
Yeah. So I think this leads back to, normally we put the call to raise money at the end, but since it's appropriate to the conversation here, I thought it'd be good to put the plug in the middle and to do it live, not just the pre-recorded segment as it usually is.
Yeah.
I don't think we came to any firm conclusions here, nor do I think...
Nor were we expecting to.
Yeah, I don't think you necessarily can. It is so much in each to their own person, but I hope hearing the three of us go on a bit about why this matters to us for whatever our personal reasons is useful to some extent. And so, the three of us have committed to helping to raise some money for the restoration of Notre Dame. Tom has done a great job of getting us in contact with Friends of Notre Dame, which is that a US-based organization or is it French?
I think it's an international organization, but they do a ton of work in the US, I think.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And so we've each donated our own money to that. Zach has confirmed that here. I wasn't sure if that was true until he said it here. And now
I said my time was more valuable than my money. I haven't confirmed anything.
Okay.
If I said anything in the past, then that may have been a slip of the tongue.
I got nice cards from them. They gave a nice little packet of Notre Dame cards, greeting cards that you can then give out.
Yeah, I got those too. They're nice.
I got a nice official Friend of Notre Dame card.
Yep, I got that too. It's in my wallet.
Wasn't there something else? Of course, it's in your wallet.
Of course.
I get so much mailings from all these different charities all over the spectrum. I have a small mailbox.
Oh, look at you. All these charities.
And like half of it is like coupons for supermarkets. And like the other half of it is like, hey, donate some money to us. And I'm like, ah.
Well, so what's nice about the Notre Dame, Friends of Notre Dame is it's not just, of course it is, they're asking for more money, but like they actually sent very nice, like a set of like 10 greeting cards that are blank on the inside, but with very pretty pictures of Notre Dame on the outside. Like that's a useful thing for them to have sent.
Yeah.
I hope it equaled the amount of money I gave them. But here's the reason. Here's the segue into donating.
Well, actually, I have one more bullet point.
Go for it.
And that, I talked about, why support this kind of cause in general, but I think also I wanted to talk more about my second bullet point of why this building and why not other buildings. Of course, like we mentioned, Washington National Cathedral had the earthquake, has had a lot of damage, and has been sitting for 10 years unfinished in terms of its own restoration. Also, interestingly enough, lots of grand cathedrals, even really famous ones, which you would think would be totally fine on their, their money, have been struggling, especially during the pandemic when so many of them and their operating budgets, which have largely been based on tourism, have been slashed during the pandemic when there just haven't been tourists or they haven't been allowed to have tourists. St. Paul's Cathedral in London, I remember reading an article just a couple months ago talking about how they're in pretty dire financial straits, which is surprising considering that is St. Paul's Cathedral in the heart of London, right? If St. Paul's Cathedral is having financial hardships right now, clearly probably all of them are, because if that's the most famous one in England, then probably every cathedral in England is having really hard times trying to maintain just operations, let alone, perform, basic serviceable repairs and, maintenance to keep themselves afloat. So again, why just Notre Dame? Well, for starters, of course, there's the pragmatic answer. Notre Dame was the theme of the podcast. That's how we've started off. And I think for at least the time being, I think it's nice to have a singular focus on one building. Yeah. And again, the fire caught a lot of attention, of course, and people identify very viscerally with,
catastrophes.
Having watched that fire, it builds lots of publicity. And so I think we'll have generally more success at first. But eventually, one day, I think we may very well, branch out a bit and we can try to raise some more money for some of these other cathedrals that are also struggling. Again, like St. Paul's, Washington National Cathedral, and not even necessarily just cathedrals, but other cultural works of art, if we can find more ways to support those. But first, we need more listeners and more donors. So with that, hopefully you feel inspired, folks.
And where can they donate?
Oh, right. So if you go to our website, which is cathedraltalk.fm, we have a button for support Friends of Notre Dame. And if you again click that link, that'll take you to Friends of Notre Dame's donation page. And in this case, we have a setup with Friends of Notre Dame where if you donate through this link through our website, it will then generate data for us so that we know you will have donated on the behalf of our podcast. So we will know that our podcast has been reaching out and that we are succeeding, which will then motivate us to make more episodes. If you enjoy listening to us blather on about, all the shenanigans we usually do, hopefully you will continue to inspire us by occasionally making a nice little $5 donation or even more. So that would be terrific.
And that's why we're asking all of you to contribute only the low price of $50 an episode we put out to Notre Dame. Every single one of you, we can do it.